Marbs here, and welcome back to Retro Marbs. Now, this time on Retro Marbs, we have episode 2 of the Sprint 45. This time around, we're going to look at racing and flying games. Now, racing games is interesting on Intellivision because, honestly, the third-party racing games that were released for Intellivision, I would say are a lot better than the Intellivision released or INTV released games that are on Sprint. Now, as for flying games, which I'm including space games in that, obviously you've got both Space Armada and Astrosmash. Astrosmash probably is the one game on Intellivision that I think is a lot of the legacy. I can remember playing a lot of Astrosmash, and next to NFL football, I don't know if any other game got as much time on my console. Even today, now with it being easier than ever with the Sprint, I can go back and play Astrosmash, and I love Astrosmash. It's a lot of fun to play, and one that you should check out if you've never played it on Intellivision or you're new to Intellivision. Now, Space Armada, on the other hand, I think stands out as one of the best Space Invader clones that we have for this era of system. And part of that has to do with the bright colors and really bold animations with big figures, for the aliens of course, on the screen. Also, at the time, one of the things that's real unique about it is it was able to get a lot of sprites moving on the screen at once, which we come to find out later was nothing but a little bit of a programming trick that worked really well for this game. Now, let's get into Intellivision Sprint 45, Racing and Flying, right now.
Programmer John Soule created what, for me, was arguably the crown jewel of my Intellivision collection. Astrosmash isn't easy, and to be good at it, you've got to be consistent and really take risks only if you have to. Now, I would estimate that this is the only game in my original Intellivision collection that I probably have more playtime in than NFL football. This looks great on a modern TV, and playing it on Sprint was a great experience. I still feel Astrosmash is one of the true gems unique to the Intellivision platform, and one of the games that I return to play routinely. Auto Racing, written by Larry Zwick at APH Technology, is another one of the Intellivision games I had with my original Intellivision, and one of the games that caused me the biggest grief because I didn't like the steering of the car. Little did I know that Mattel realized that there was a steering issue and made a production change to the game that changed the steering in later cartridges, and I found this to be considerably better. One additional fun fact about the game is that the game has 5 tracks that can actually be driven off through the trees from one track to the next track, but finding the hidden drag strip is the thing people always talk about in this game. Hover Force is another interesting Intellivision tale because apparently it was supposed to use 3D glasses. The original development for the game centered around a University of Georgia developed pseudo 3D glasses under the codename Project Peach. Mattel Electronics closed prior to the project getting fully off the ground, but INTV later took the original code and revised this helicopter terrorist shooter and created a non-3D version of the game with a bit higher level of difficulty. This is another game that came out way late in the Intellivision's history, and it is very evident that Intellivision development had come a long way, as the game used a number of new techniques that really make the game shine. This is one worth checking out for sure. Motocross was created by Rick Koenig, who's probably better known for the Imagic titles Microsurgeon and Truckin' on Intellivision than Motocross. Now, the game was released in 1983, but was announced in 1981 and 1982 in the Intellivision catalogs. Now, Rick's algorithms for Motocross were used in Stadium Mud Buggies, and believe it or not, Racing Destruction Set for the Commodore 64 at EA, which was produced by Don Daglow, his old Mattel boss. The game isn't easy and requires a lot of patience to be good at playing it. No platform in this time space would be complete without some sort of a Space Invader game, and Intellivision was no different. Again, Intellivision programmers programmers from APH Technology leaned very hard into the big, bold, multicolored graphics, which I still feel makes this one of the best looking Space Invaders clones out there. One of the most unique things at the time this game was released is use of clever programming techniques to create the illusion of more than 8 sprites moving on the screen at one time, which was quite amazing on Intellivision. It was one of the games that saw a lot of playtime from me. Astrosmash and Space Armada are two of my top favorites on the Intellivision Sprint, and worth playing if you are new to Intellivision and trying to decide what to. Space Battle was supposed to be a Battlestar Galactica branded game, and while Mattel enjoyed the licensing for toys and even an LCD handheld, they did not get the video game license like they expected. The game itself is a combination radar scream and battle mode game. Similarities to Atari's own Star Raiders have been suggested as inspiration for this one as well. This is another one that I feel moves a little too slow, but does show Intellivision was keen on these space-oriented experiences, but it might not provide enough action to keep you playing. Space Spartans was the first game released by Mattel to use the Intellivoice. For those that don't know, the Intellivoice module provided speech synthesis using the General Instruments SP0256 Orator chip for Intellivoice-enabled games. Due to limited cartridge sizes at the time, the amount of voice dialogue that could be used in a game had to be kept to a minimum using a very low sampling rate, which contributes to the lack of clarity in the voice lines in the game. Space Spartans was supposed to have 3 additional foreign language versions that would require the international version of the Intellivoice module, but the foreign language versions as well as the international Intellivoice module never made it out the door. As for the game itself, it is better than Space Battle, but I always felt it was a little thin on content as the voice was the star of the show. It seemed like the game was an afterthought. Still, it stands as one of the best playable experiences of Intellivoice. Trying to explain to people what Stadium Mud Buggies isn't is by far easier than explaining what it actually is. And this isn't made any easier by the fact that there are no Stadium Mud Buggies and it looks like trucks of some sort. This INTV release was part of the 1989 INTV catalog. The game is actually motocross with different graphics, or as they referred to it, a super enhanced version of motocross, if you will. This is one of the games on Sprint that you have likely never seen before, and like Spiker Volleyball, Stadium Mud Buggies was available in a Blue Sky Rangers reproduction with a different box, and also like Spiker, this one's expensive in cartridge format. As for the game, it is hard like motocross, which is no surprise. With the popularity of Star Wars Death Star destruction sequence, everyone had to have a trench flying game of some sort. Some platforms did it well, others did it so-so. This is a fair trench shooter for that time, and actually, it was the top-selling game for Intellivision in 1982. The game itself does move a bit slow at points, which does add to the slow pacing of the game, which I don't particularly care for. While it's not overly difficult, it takes a lot of practice to achieve great scores. A pixelated trip back in time among the stars that is worth checking out. Originally designed to be a collection of games that were inspired by Atari 2600 classics bundled onto one value-add cart, the racing cars, biplanes, and battle tanks were actually only 3 of the 5 games that were intended to be on this cartridge. Both the Breakout and Pong-like hockey game were cut from the cartridge when Mattel lawyers asked that they be removed. The game was known originally as 3-in-1 Arcade, which marketing later turned into Triple Action. The biplanes was said to be a favorite among Mattel programmers and a significant time waster. The game provides a significant challenge that you might not expect. The racing cars and battle tanks were never really ones that I played. I too was all about the biplanes.
Wow, so there you have it. I'll tell you what, this category, I think more than any other, especially for what we're calling the flying games, which are the flying and the space games, is probably one of the categories on Sprint that I think they got really well right, because they've got a really good selection of the classic games that you would want to play from the Intellivision era, and with this HDMI connection, it's easy to do. Now, I gotta say, next time around, we're gonna look at combat and action games in the Sprint 45 Episode 3. But still, I think it's going to be hard to top the games that we saw here in Episode 2. Now, tell me that you like this Sprint content. You want me to keep doing it by smashing that thumbs up button. My name is Marbs. Subscribe if you can. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.